Welcome to the Walk Ride GM podcast. I'm Harry Gray.
And I'm Will York. This month we're talking about Harry's brand new e-bike,
Our infrastructure trip to Oldham,
big announcements for active travel from the new Transport Secretary,
and how we at Walk Ride GM effectively campaign in the city. Now, this week I'm really excited because I've got a new bike, which is quite a big deal as a cyclist. Everyone loves that new bike day. And there's a reason I have this new bike.
Harry's pointing at the bike now. It's actually in the podcast studio just behind me.
Yeah, which crucially, the important part is it's folded up in the podcast studio, which means I've bought a folding bike, but not just a folding bike. It is an electric folding bike.
Welcome to the fold.
Well, yeah, I'm in the fold community now, which is actually nice because I was outside the fold community for a long time looking in, and I didn't really understand the fold community. It was like I had to sort of like, do it to live it, to experience it. And now I'm in. I'm loving it. It's great. I have that flexibility to just take my bike anywhere in an emergency.
Have you experienced that thing yet where everyone else? Well, it probably happens more with Bromptons than other bikes. If I encounter another Brompton owner on a train, they'll often like try and start a conversation with me just because we own the same bike, which I find a bit weird, to be honest. Maybe I'm still too much of a southerner.
That happens a lot with other things as well. Like I know VW drivers, van drivers, if you drive past a VW driver, they always wave at you. And it's like bus drivers waving at each other too. It's that like idea that you're in the same club.
Yeah.
It's like community, isn't it? I like it. Even a community can be, people you don't know as well, which I find interesting. But the reason I've got this bike is because, first of all, I'm going on a tour around the Netherlands next week. So I needed a bike to go around the Netherlands that isn't a road bike. And isn't a cargo bike. But also this year I was diagnosed with long COVID, so I needed an electric bike because at the moment I can't actually ride my analog bikes because I need to sort of like save my energy and not waste it, which is like a big part of like long COVID, is just to sort of save energy and not overexert yourself. So I'm in the club now where my bike is kind of like a mobility aid for me because I can't really do anything without my e-bike at the moment. Like walking's quite difficult. And getting about generally is quite difficult. So the e-bike is just like a lifesaver for me. So I now have the lived experience that I have been advocating for many years. For other people I've seen have this sort of like transformation with the e-bike, and it's in a way like it's been a bad year for me because obviously I'm ill. But it's nice to have, and it's nice to sort of understand why e-bikes are so useful for so many people.
So this new bike would have come in handy on our trip the other day, wouldn't it?
Yeah, because I was on my cargo bike and you were on your Brompton with your little tiny skinny wheels. And we were sort of going a bit off-road on this sort of cobbly, canal path sort of a bit. And yeah, it is a bit crazy, I have to say, on those cobbles. Like they're not designed for all people, are they?
Yeah, I mean, you on the electric cargo bike could at least get up it, although expending great energy and running down your battery at an alarming rate. I was literally like unable to go up some of those ramps. I had to get off the Brompton and push it up because the tyres, like 35 mil wide tyres, were just getting trapped in the gaps between cobbles, and you're just not able to make any headway. And that's quite a shame, really, because it was the Ashton Canal that we started. Well, we were meant to be on the Rochdale Canal, but I took us the wrong way onto the Ashton Canal.
I mean, they all look the same, these canals, don't they?
Yeah, there should be an Oldham Canal, basically, or an Oldham route.
Yeah, and I think these canals, like, they're interesting because they're obviously quite nice leisure routes, and the sort of argument is, should we be spending loads of money doing them up, making them better, or is that sort of a waste of resources when we could be spending that on road infrastructure? I think in a perfect world, you'd probably do both, but maybe if we're prioritising where we spend our money at the moment, it's probably better to do on-road infrastructure that's, better for everyone.
Yeah, it's this thing, like, people always seem to talk a lot about the Bridgewater Canal down towards Altrincham.
Yeah, I agree, and it's like the A56 route, the alternative on the canal, even if it's okay for some people, it's obviously not okay for everyone because it's not like lit or safe like at night, and it's also just a bit narrow. It's just not got the capacity for what modal shift we need, to meet our targets.
And it's not, the thing about canal routes as well is they're really quite invisible. Well, there's two things. They're invisible to people who are currently not walking or cycling. Like, they're not on the canal. They don't see it as a route. They don't see sort of, even if you re-tarmac it and relight it and make it sort of quite an attractive route, at least for, some of the day. If it's not visible to you, how are you going to get modal shift? How are you going to get new people out walking, cycling, using the route?
Yeah, because actually my mum has, she moved to Manchester a few years ago and she's got like a bike. She's been pootling around, like, getting to the city centre and stuff, which is good because before she didn't really ride a bike. And I told her about the Fallowford Loop and she lives next to it. And I was, oh yeah, I use this Fallowford Loop to get in. She went, oh, I didn't know about that. And I just thought, well, it's not signpost. There's no maps. There's no way of knowing it's there. It's kind of hidden. So why would you, like, we're like nerds. We love finding all these paths, don't we?
Mm-hmm.
Right? But most people aren't like us. Most people just like want to go somewhere and like just go on whatever's in front of them. So what's available to them.
And this is why, routes like the A56, the A6, Oldham Road, Rochdale Road, if you build infrastructure that is high quality, visibly used on the routes that people are already taking, whether it's by bus or by car, that's how you get those people to think, oh, maybe I should try that.
It's that argument, isn't it? What you get what you see. So like you get the people that you see. So if you see loads of driving, then you get loads more driving. If you start seeing more bike lanes about and more people cycling, you get that critical mass, and then all of a sudden, more, it just sort of snowballs. So I can see that, and it's important that we provide infrastructure for everyone, and it shouldn't just be like sidelined, marginalised onto sort of a canal path and made into sort of niche sort of hobby. It needs to be, for it to be for everyone, it needs to be out in the open scene, and like that will create like a mass movement for cycling.
You can see the appeal for councils and spending money on upgrading routes which already exist. There's not going to be any controversy. They're not having to reallocate space from anyone else. To upgrade a canal towpath that already exists is a pretty easy job. The problem is, if it doesn't work for everyone, then it's not the priority right now. And you and me, we were saying on our trip to Oldham that we're going to talk about, we went down a lovely greenway. It was really great. It was really pleasant. It was nice in the daytime, but probably wouldn't want to use it at night. And we were, very aware that it's not like a direct, useful, visible commuter route. It was just this thing that we were able to enjoy because we are comfortable doing sort of leisure
distances. But also another point is it doesn't connect where people are going. It's a leisure route that takes you a longer distance, right? Mm. So if we're going all the way to Oldham, it's great. But if I'm trying to get to like the shop or school or whatever, it doesn't take me to any of those places. So it doesn't actually, it's not as useful for A to B journeys as dedicated on street cycle infrastructure. What about Oldham, right? Because once we got to Oldham,
oh wait, you've missed the best part.
Oh, about getting to Oldham.
Getting to Oldham.
God, I wanted to forget about that, if I'm honest. That was the bit I was going to forget.
So just to set the scene, we've gone the wrong way along the Ashton Canal, and then we got as far as Phillips Park and realised we needed to reroute because we weren't going to Oldham at all. And we went on to, I'll look up the name of the road, but yeah, like you say, a B road, like a. Do you want to elaborate on the kind of road we turned onto? I
mean, it's the kind of road, like I said, that in the past you wouldn't have much traffic on it. It would be a road that only people who live there would drive down, and most people would use the main like dual carriageway next to it. But because of like apps like Waze and stuff, like people are just using these roads to get about now, and they're just chocker. 2 p.m. on a weekday, it was really busy. And the issue is that you're cycling on a small, what we feel is like a cycling road, but everyone else for them it's a road that they want to get to work or get to wherever. And people are really aggressive, and they're sort of getting angry at you for cycling too abreast and honking and shouting. And it was a bit of a shock really, because I've in the city centre people don't really behave like that in the city centre. And it's sort of interesting like that there's a sort of section of people who see a cyclist and another cyclist cycling next to each other and get like irate. Not just like, oh, I'm annoyed, like genuinely irate, like sort of red mist irate, which I just find crazy.
I mean, even if we're breaking the rules, which we're not, like, I think that's quite scary as well. Like the sheer ignorance of the highway code.
And there's not been enough messaging, really, counter messaging from the government, from Cycling UK, from a lot of these bodies that, you know, they need to capture the message about the highway code changes and behaviour on the road, because we're slipping away from good etiquette on the road. And I think that's because people don't feel the road is a fair place. Like, everyone's angry at people breaking the rules. Everyone's angry at, you know, the traffic. And I think that's where the whole like Dutch method comes in, because, you know, the Dutch drivers are the happiest drivers in the world for a reason, because there's enough choice that people don't, you know, feel that driving's the only option for them, and they get stuck in traffic everywhere.
And obviously, if you were in the Netherlands, that kind of conflict wouldn't occur, right? Because every road is either busy enough that you need the cycle and pedestrian infrastructure completely separate from traffic, or it's quiet enough that like people can share the road amicably and with sort of a road layout that's set up to do that.
Yeah, and they filter their streets. You know, they don't call them LTNs, they just do it.
Yeah.
They're just part of their road design is filtering roads, because they know that that's how you design a system that works.
And whereas what we have here is a road that, you know, like you say, should only really exist to serve the residential streets that junction off it, and instead it's being used as if it's an A road.
Yeah, and people behave like it's an A road.
But it's not treated like an A road in design. It's literally just the same narrow, difficult pinch point road that it's always been. And so, like, I think the abuse we received was shocking, like way, way over the top. But you can see that conflict is built into the road design there.
So when we eventually got to Oldham and we sort of calmed down a little bit, because I needed calming down, I was actually pleasantly surprised with what Oldham is getting on with. At first, I saw like a little bit of infrastructure, and I thought, okay, like it's all right. But then as we got further into the town centre, I actually it was quite interesting to see this sort of concept of the ring road, and then that approach where the inside the ring road is like pedestrianised and access only for deliveries drop off, and basically very well designed in terms of the cycle lanes, the parking, the gardens, the sort of amenities, the way that people can sit and lie around without having to spend money. And it's that idea that like a public space is for people and not cars. And it's not, you know, monetized public space. Public space is for the public to use. And I really like that about Oldham. It's a place where you want to hang out and chill. And, you know, you can go to the shop and buy a cheap, like, you know, go to Greg's and get a pasty, and you just go sit outside. You know, you don't have to like feel like you're lurking around and not being able to use the space. So I really enjoyed Oldham.
And then you have the really recent phase of works, which is the new planters, brand new cycle lanes, suds, like bike stands, benches. Oh, really good benches.
Benches, also those big boulders that they have. Kind of makes it kind of feel like you're in, I don't know, the wild. It was kind of crazy, like to see those on High Street. I quite enjoyed them, actually. It kind of had a forest feel to it. Did you not think?
Yeah, like, and just, I mean, obviously Oldham town centre is already thriving. It's so nice to see a town centre that's, you know, not a big city like Manchester or Salford, but the town of Oldham, people are still clearly every single day on a weekday going out to the town centre, doing their shopping, bringing life to the place. Businesses seem to be doing well. Businesses seem to be benefiting from the fact that people are enjoying the new greenery and the new benches and spending more time there. Yeah,
and it's important that, like, as Manchester grows, we don't forget about the sort of orbital, the towns on the outskirts, you know, the towns that the people, you know, the sort of Peterloo towns, you know, towns that people came from for the Peterloo massacre. These places are so important to Greater Manchester, and it's, you know, they can't be left behind, you know, as Manchester becomes, quite a centralized sort of place with the skyscrapers going up and all the money investment in the centre. So I like going to these places because it tells you a story about the city as a wider place. I like going to like Altrincham. I thought all the stuff that I saw in Altrincham a few weeks ago, that was incredible too. I think it adds new life to these places which have probably seen the worst part of the 20th century in terms of post-industrialization, population decrease, and the sort of the exodus of the town to the suburbs. And I think this brings new life to the centre, re-energises the centre, and there's plans to build more dense housing in the centre of Oldham too, which to me, that's how you get like a place back on its feet. You need people to actually live there. Manchester was in the same position 20 years ago, or 20, 30 years ago. People didn't live here, and it's such a better place to be. And everyone loves the vibe, like the sort of energy that Manchester has now, because there's enough people living in the centre who call it home.
Yeah. So big credit, I think, to Oldham Council, to GMCA and TFGM for coming in with the new bus interchange, and who we found out who the designer. We didn't know this at the time. We were like, who designed this? It's really, really good. It was Planet.
Yeah, Planet.
Consultancy out of Liverpool.
Yeah, we've been giving them a bit of credit recently, haven't we?
Yeah, because Pete came on Twitter. He's the director, and was like, I'm not paying you, am I? Like,
I know. But, at the end of the day, if we see good things, we have to praise them. And, it just seems like they're sort of doing a lot of the work in Greater Manchester that we like. I think it's that what's interesting really with this is the difference between something designed by, a public realm sort of consultancy versus like a highways engineering like in-house team. Look at the difference of something like Stevenson Square versus this. And I think both sides can be better in, can make placemaking better for the outcome they want to serve. So public realm can sometimes not be as transport orientated. It can be like destination focused.
But that actually, it can be, I keep banging on about this point, that can be what's really, really good for walking and getting people walking. I don't think it's a highway engineer's transportation issue. I think it's placemaking. If you make really nice places where people want to dwell, where people want to sit, where people are comfortable to spend time, that's what makes people choose to walk rather than get in the car.
Yeah, of course. I am concerned a little bit about public realm not being as integrated into the way that the highways and the sort of the highways team work. I'd like there to be more like cooperation sort of between, the council and these sort of architects or people, public realm kind of people who sort of sometimes you look at the renders they draw and it almost is like pie in the sky stuff. It's like you've not even looked at the constraints of the site. Like you just sort of drawing a best case scenario of like, the ultimate thing for this space. But sometimes it's a bit more nuanced than that. And
I think we noticed, didn't we? Like we've actually spoken a lot about walking and about placemaking and about improving the town centre, and not much about cycling, because if we're honest, we didn't see many cyclists in Oldham. It's at the top of a hill, and some of the next phases of work that are planned, one is St Mary's Way, which is kind of interesting because
it's the ring road, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a brand new Streets for All scheme. It's going to be like, a more pleasant environment, really nice smooth cycle lanes, really nice trees and planting, but it's also got a really steep hill on it, and it's just a bypass around the town centre. And you're like, if you've built a route for people to walk and cycle through the town centre and the shops, I'm not entirely convinced by who's going to be using that bypass.
Yeah, but I'd see it differently. I think ring roads, they can be a barrier to that sort of the outside of the ring road, the sort of suburbs and the centre. And I think you're seeing it as like a route round in a circle, but I see it more as like each node on that sort of ring road where there's a crossing. That crossing has to be a good experience for people walking and cycling. Now, if you do that on each crossing, you might as well put a bike lane all the way around as well to connect them all. Like, it's not, if the ring road's wide enough, then you might as well do it.
Yeah. Oh, and we spoke about this on the day, didn't we, as well? It's the opportunity for the town centre to grow and not be constrained by the ring road
Exactly.
as like a collar around
Because
it.
if the ring road, if you treat the ring road in a certain way, you can actually then start getting more dense buildings outside the ring road that connect into the centre.
Yeah.
So I think it is a good idea to spend money on the ring road. But I do understand what you're trying to say in terms of the centre's already been treated. But it's that idea that, you know, maybe we've not had it very good recently, and we don't have to. Sometimes we don't have to choose between two things. We can have both. We can have our cake and eat it. So in Oldham, let's just have our cake and eat it and make a good plan for the whole town centre.
Absolutely. So we left Oldham, heading down on the National Cycle Network to towards Ashton. And well, the next phase of work that's planned for Oldham Town Centre is that connection, because getting from the town centre, which is really nice, to the start of the National Cycle Network route was really grim, wasn't it? Just getting over that ring road and along a bit of a feeder road.
Yeah, there's that sort of like out of town shopping centre as well, which has got loads of traffic near it, and crossing over there was a bit no signals.
Yeah.
It was a bit
People were nice. People let us through, and we're driving well, but it was a slow, awkward experience. So it's really good that they're addressing that as well. It's not just a town centre scheme, but it's about starting to link Oldham up to other towns and to other places around.
And we went down that valley, didn't we, where they're going to build that really cool like bridge through the trees. So
Tameside and Oldham boroughs collaborating, presumably with Sustrans involvement as well, are going to have a walking and cycling bridge over Park Bridge, which is a huge valley. I mean, it must be a massive investment.
And, you know, that's a route that people can use to get about, but it's also going to become an attraction for people to come visit and look at. You know, and I think that's important. You know, having nice things like the interchange in Stockport, the ramp, that it makes people proud of where they live. Because it's cool and it's interesting. And they get to show people it. They get to use it every day. They get to be proud about where they live. I think people undervalue that. You know, everything's so sort of utilitarian, transactional in society sometimes. Sometimes, especially with budget cuts, I think sometimes we undervalue how sort of nice things make people feel good about where they live. I've heard something about like people who, when you remove graffiti and tidy the bins, people feel a lot better about where they live.
Yeah,
considerably more than you think.
So, and that bridge that's planned between Oldham and Tameside on the National Cycle Network, I think it's almost like we've been starved for so long that we're surprised to see a proposal to spend that much money on walking and cycling infrastructure. But this might become the norm, right? With new announcements from the Secretary of State. Yeah.
I was eagerly anticipating the interview on Streets Ahead podcast with Laura Laker. I thought it was a really cool interview, actually. Like, cool in the sense that, like, you know, she seemed pretty chill, down to earth, very happy to do a very relaxed interview style on a National Cycle Network, on an e-bike. You know, that's, you know, compared to what we've had previously, that is, you know, really exciting. And, you know, there's obviously no numbers yet, but from what, you can decipher from what she said, like what the way that we're going. And it looks really good for the National Cycle Network. I think from that, you know, Laura Laker's book, it's quite clear the National Cycle Network had this great vision, you know, this great idea in the past, and it's kind of like fizzled out a bit. And, you know, there's not enough power from central government to sort of actually create and not maintain and create the National Cycle Network. So, you know, Sustrans do a great job, but we really, you know, we can't have a charity running a national infrastructure project. So I think it's great that there's been a bit of movement on that so that the National Cycle Network can become something like that you see in the Netherlands. And in Belgium, they have a great National Cycle Network too. So I'm really excited.
I was also really struck that Louise Haigh, like, she, you know, this wasn't sort of news to her. Like, she'd clearly sort of done more than just read a few briefing sheets. She'd clearly, like, actually research this stuff, actually starting to understand the importance and the benefits of active travel to public health. Yeah. Like that's a connection that sort of we haven't seen a transport secretary make before.
The way I describe it is like she's been red pilled, like which is from the Matrix, if you know the blue and the red pill. Like it's almost like she's seen the light, like she understands all the things that people have been like sometimes moaning about on Twitter for years, sort of like banging your head against the wall stuff where you're like, how can they not see the connection between public health, cycling, walking? It makes so much sense to all of us. And it feels like finally someone in government, it makes sense to them too. And I'm excited because who knows where this could go? Like, obviously it's early days, but, if we can really, get our ducks in order and actually not just the funding. I don't think the funding's everything. I think really there's a lot of problems to sort within councils in terms of the skills, in terms of the security they have on funds, and also in terms of the way that they're managed by central government. I'm a bit worried that Louise Haigh said that we're going to leave councils to it. I think councils, they need guidance from central government. Councils are, that you saw how quickly low traffic neighbourhoods were completely banished, pulled, out from underneath us when central government came after them. That just shows that councils do follow central government. So we do need to let councils get on with interventions, but we also need to give them a nudge and a push into the right direction.
Yeah, especially, and this comes back to the thing we discussed last episode about geographical inequality in the country, and leaving everything up to the local authorities may be great for somewhere like Greater Manchester, with the GMCA and with sort of a vision and an ambition. But if you're in the middle of rural Staffordshire and you don't feel safely able to walk or cycle to work, like what if your council, if your council's left entirely up to its own devices? What if they don't want to do it? What if they're not on board politically?
But I do think there's that idea that we have to prioritise funding. And I think we have to give to councils that want to do it, first and foremost. Because we've seen that model successfully work in terms of the last few rounds of funding from Active Travel England. They've been prioritising councils that want to get on with delivering. And then I think you have to build out from there. I do feel that maybe Active Travel England, from what we've seen with the A6, it doesn't seem like they have the teeth to enforce the sort of terms of the funding at the moment with the sustainable city transport settlement. I'm just a bit concerned that maybe we need to legislate here. It's not all about funding. It's important that we legislate. Make sure that Active Travel England have teeth, make sure that they can design review schemes so that it's not just at the whim of a highways engineer. Because sometimes the political will's there, but it's actually, the training and the skills and the officers that isn't there. So that's something that's just really important.
Yeah, probably the most important thing about allocating new funding is having some control over how that funding is spent. And like you say, we've seen so many things happen recently across Greater Manchester, the sort of tail end of the Tory government, I suppose you'd call them, schemes, where there's money available, Transport for Greater Manchester and Active Travel England are allowed to comment on those schemes, but had no power to pull the funding if they weren't good enough. It was purely between the local authority and the Department for Transport. And what's effectively happened in some cases, not Oldham, well done Oldham, what's effectively happened in some cases is a bit of a cash grab by councils to resurface their roads, to put a bit of capital investment in. But, they're using a sustainable transport and active travel pot of money to pay for general road improvements for drivers.
Yeah, and it's quite clear some of these funding guidelines shouldn't increase, traffic, car capacity, has to improve walking and cycling. And these objectives just aren't being met. And that's why we're so irate, actually, about what's happening on the A6 and also the Eccleswold Road in Salford. It's like this idea that they're just using it as a cash grab to sort of resurface the road. That's not what the funding's for. And Andrew Gilligan is quite clear about that. He said that it's not what it's for, and he wrote the document. So it's important that we push councils on this, and that's something we're going to continue to do, is push, especially on the A6. We're going to push them, as to get the infrastructure that we think and everyone else knows is necessary on the A6. And that leads us on nicely to sort of a bit of introspection on Walk Ride GM and what we do and how we campaign, and the tone that we take with schemes and politicians and the public.
Yeah, I mean it's something that's come up quite a few times recently. I think is where do we sit as an organisation in terms of praising things and criticising things in the public sphere versus in the private sphere. A lot of this hinges around what's known as the critical friend role, which in essence says that once you have an authority that's on board with the mission, with delivering for active travel, then your role as a campaign group shifts to always being the authority's friend in public, right? Praising the good things they do publicly, saying good things about schemes as long as they're passable, and saving your criticism for the private conversations, for the sort of the sort of behind closed doors forums with the councils. That's where we should be pushing them on the stuff that's not quite right and that could be better next time, without sort of completely panning the scheme in the public sphere.
I'd say and maybe disagree with that sort of idea that you can't be critical publicly, because people expect Walk Ride GM to be honest and frank, and I think we have to be careful that we don't turn into cheerleaders. Well, how does anyone know if we're being critical if we do it behind closed doors? Like, we can't, to the public, we'd just be seen as cheerleaders. So I think it's important that I think it is important that politicians see that, like, decisions that are made have outcomes, and that, like, outrage or calling it out can happen. And that politically can be, detrimental for them. So that can work in our favour, because we can publicly say things don't work, and then they rush to look at it and make a change.
I think you put it really well. Actually, I'm gonna quote you, Harry.
Oh.
Wait, no, I haven't found it yet. I'm not going to quote you. I'm going to paraphrase you. The highest praise should be given to authorities when they get difficult things right. And public criticism, though, seems totally fair when you have really easy problems and easy stuff and you still manage to get it wrong.
Yeah, it's like the guidance is clear, LTN 120 is clear. I mean, obviously there's a bit of leeway here and there, but like when it's like something like a cycle lane going over a side road and we're still giving way to the road, I mean, that's 101.
Yeah.
And if councils are still letting that slip, I don't know how much internal conversations you can have that jolt people and make them see that that's a problem. And also, I do feel that I would be cautious that politicians would probably quite like us to come onto the inside and not criticise them publicly. That's quite convenient for them. And I think we've got to be careful not to fall into a trap where we do exactly what politicians want us to do. We are independent. We're a campaign group. We don't want to fall into that trap of becoming silent because we're getting in a good relationship with politicians.
I think it's important as well that we're continuing to build our own skills and our own knowledge, and we're building a relationship with councillors and with elected politicians where they need to trust us, right? We need to be positive and knowledgeable in the right ways, where there is a level of trust. Because let's face it, councillors are very busy people. They don't have time on their hands like we do to be experts on transport design. And I think we can look at a scheme and say, the person who designed this hates cyclists. And that won't be obvious to a councillor. It won't be obvious to a bystander. But we're just so invested in this stuff that we can see when someone has really deliberately done something that is anti-cyclist effectively, or anti-pedestrian, or or not good for disabled users. And I think the challenge is to to get to a point in the relationship where when we spot that and when we flag it, it's listened to and acted upon.
Yeah, and it's also an interesting point you made there. How do we know if it's malicious or just ignorance?
I guess you can never know for sure, but when something has been absolute front page of the guidance for like 5 years now, and how ignorant can you be and still have a job as a highways engineer? I think sometimes it is malicious. I think it is sometimes people very deliberately saying, "Nah, I'm a driver and I want to drive quickly, just like I did in 1990."
Wow. I mean, that's bold. I like it. It's bold. And maybe we're here for some hot takes on the podcast too.
Don't know if we should leave that in.
And obviously there's a balance, because sometimes it feels like the council think we're being too critical, and sometimes in the public people think we're being not critical enough. So, for instance, with the Deansgate works, we liaised with the officers, councillors, we understood the scheme, and we kind of understood the constraints they were under. They were under a lot of constraints on the funding timeline, when to deliver it, the amount of funding for the intervention scale, but also just like the pedestrian footfall, the event space that happens on Deansgate. It kind of turned into a compromise scheme, which is fine because public space kind of is compromised sometimes. Like, I don't think people understand that. It's like, sometimes you can't have everything in public space. It kind of is a compromise of all the modes and the destination sort of aspect. And I saw that, and from Walk Ride GM, I kind of put the case that Deansgate was sort of the best really that we're going to get. Maybe that's a bit unambitious, but I was quite happy with the outcome, which was it's fundamentally connecting Deansgate all the way through to Chorlton, which we haven't had, for years, ever. So, and
you were quite outspoken in that view, I think it's fair to say, certainly on Twitter.
I think it's difficult, really, because try to be objective, but then sometimes you get pulled in on the opposite side where you end up hearing discourse from people criticising, and you feel like your back's up against the wall because you've been involved in the process a bit more than you would normally as just a citizen. And you think, oh, hang on, no, that's not right. And you end up defending it when it's not really yours to defend. And I think that's a very easy pitfall and a lesson to learn there. Is like, it's, we can and should as campaigners support a scheme that is generally good for active travel, even if it has tweaks needed or things that aren't quite perfect and compromises made. But yeah, it is not our job to defend it. Like, we can just say we think this is good and deserves the organisation's support. We don't have to go and sort of try and justify all the little things that aren't perfect. Yeah, I do take that on, but I do think it gives us a little bit of, a cover politically when we do praise schemes. It gives us cover because it shows that we're not just here to moan and criticise, and we're actually here to praise things when we think they're good outcomes for pedestrians and cyclists. So I am torn on that, and that's the thing with campaigning. It's not like there's no manual and there's no right or wrong answers, and I think it's just about finding that balance between all the different stakeholders that you represent.
I think I wonder whether politicians and officers really realise sort of how much of this goes on within Walk Ride. Like, there's been so many things done, delivered, planned that could have turned into a complete pylon, with like every member of Walk Ride GM getting online and going to the council and saying, this is rubbish, this is absolute crap, why are you delivering this nonsense? And actually, collectively, we do sort of get all of this aggro out and all the criticisms out and put them on the table on our Discord, and generally that mellows the response, I suppose. We tend to sort of work through it and come to a community consensus to some degree on whether the scheme is good or bad overall. And I know we always keep coming back to the A6. I think if anyone's listening from Stockport Council, it's not just that, like, a load of rabid cycle campaigners have seen the A6 and are sort of pushing to demand what they want. It's that we can see that it's really not good, and there's so little to recommend the scheme for active travel that we have to come out and say, no, you know what, we're fighting everything about this because it is just not going to deliver what the council thinks it's paying for.
It's important to know when that moment you cross that line, when it becomes something that we have to object wholeheartedly to. You know, sometimes, like with Deansgate, my position, and I feel like Walk Ride's position, was that it was compromised, but we're sort of willing to just accept it. But with something like Stockport, there was no way we were. I mean, there wasn't even a single active travel provision on it, really, other than the sort of parallel road. So that's not something that we can accept.
And that's the test, isn't it? Ultimately, what all of this comes down to is, will this scheme, is the scheme accessible, and will it enable more people to walk and cycle? And if the answer is yes, then ultimately we support it. And if the answer is no, then ultimately we don't.
I mean, if it looks like something you see in Streets for Oldham, we're fairly happy.
Yeah.
It's not that difficult, is it?
The guidance is there. So to kind of wrap it up for this episode, first off, please join the Discord if you haven't already. That's our closed online space for campaigning. It's a great place to learn more about active travel and, you know, what's going on all over the city region. And the second thing is we're having another in-person live event.
Yes, we are. We have collaborated with Manchester Urban Institute at the University of Manchester and the Healthy Active Cities at the University of Salford to put on a two-piece event at the University of Salford on Saturday, the 5th of October. Now, we've got quite a few speakers and workshops and events at this event, all about active travel, campaigning, and basically we're really excited because it's going to be a place where people can come and have a lot of discussions and learn a lot about active travel from people who are inside the industry, who are delivering active travel schemes across Greater Manchester. So there's going to be a lot of knowledge sharing there, and I'm really excited to see what we can get out of that, you know, to push active travel further forward in the city.